Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Fence podcast presented by Headbanger Sports with your host, Coach RAC and Chris. I believe Mike is gone today, so his one-liners will be missed. Today we're joined by Scott Proctor, former pitcher for the Yankees, Dodgers. He's a player I had the privilege of watching growing up a little bit. And Scott, thanks for joining us. How'd you hear about the podcast? How are you here today?
I've run into Chris a little bit around town, and he asked me to be a part of it. So I said, yeah, if you want to mess something up, have me on. Just kidding.
Very good. Okay, I heard a little bit of talk about some youth baseball stuff. Do your kids play together, or how does that work?
Yeah, so a guy that I've gotten tied in with over the years, Ryan Ellis, has been doing lessons, has worked with my wife and I have a foundation, and he's come out and done some free clinics with us and tied in with the high school and that. And then he started talking about the 16U team, and Chris' son, Landon, played on it, and my son Cooper played on it, and so we got to spend more time together. And
long summer.
Yeah, very long summer. Very long summer. Very hot summer, too.
Was a very hot summer.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's how all the connection.
Scott is a little bit kind of dumbing himself down a little bit. He does a lot within our community when it comes to the inner city baseball teams, a lot with the local Little League and FCA and a lot of different foundations around the area. So he's a great asset to all of baseball within our Florida area here, and we're happy to have you. Definitely happy to have you.
Thanks for the invitation. I really do appreciate it.
And he's a former Yankee, which makes it even better. I love that.
I tell you what, we're very blessed here to have some great people in this community. And, like I said, it's not just what I do, it's who I'm associated with. Chris, Ryan, there's a large group of people here that donate a lot of time and energy and really have a major impact. They always say that a coach will impact more kids in 1 year than most people do in a lifetime. And, it's really neat to walk around town and, as you, Rack, probably get it. Hey, coach, hey, coach, hey, coach. And I still reference my high school coaches as coach.
Absolutely.
So that never goes away. And that's, to me, one of the biggest blessings you have as an ex-player is to give back and to then become that coach that you were impacted by as a young kid. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I want to jump into that a little bit right away. You mentioned you had a foundation, and I know we briefly mentioned this before we got on tape here, but it's tough to figure out what's next in life sometimes after a big career, maybe in the spotlight a little bit. What were some of the motivations for you wanting to get into, say, coaching? Starting up this foundation. What were some of the core motivations there?
Well, honestly, it was my wife's idea. One of those great things. My wife and my agent got together and did something that I've been having to deal with for a long, long time. But I have 5 kids, 3 boys, 2 girls. My oldest is a boy. My second oldest is a girl. And when she was 3 weeks old, she went in, and the doctor said something's not right, and they went in for further follow-up. And literally, the day that I made my first major league roster, I called my wife all excited, and she goes, well, your daughter's being trauma-hawked to Miami, and, she's going in for surgery. So immediately I called Cashman, told him I got to go, drove down to Miami, and signed in the paperwork to have your daughter have her chest cut open at an infant. So she had an issue with her aortic arch that wasn't developed, and they went in, did a stent, and, it's crazy, but I'm going on every backfield in the city of Miami, trying to line catchers up to throw bullpens to stay sharp. And finally, Tori's like, "Hey, man, we got to make a move. Are you going to be with us or not?" And I said, "Yeah." I told my wife, we knew she was out of the woods, and flew out and got the game-winning loss, or game-losing pitch to Marco Scutero, who's now a good friend of mine, and on that night. So it was quite a roller coaster. But I tell you, the transition from the professional life to the normal life is very, very tough. As I was telling you, Rack, it took me 5 years. I had a lot of coaches, counselors that I went to in my transition out, and the best analogy that someone told me was this counselor. She said, "You're no different than institutionalized people." And I was like, "Man, I've never heard that." And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "You're told when to eat, when to go to the bathroom, when to show up, when to do everything. It's no different than someone that's been institutionalized for a length of time." And, as you're around type A personalities all the time, that it's a different mindset. And to go into, for me, corporate America, it was adventurous. I will say that. But, even with me, I never felt that baseball defined who I was as a person. But after 17 years in professional sports, and then of course playing baseball since you were 3 or 5, and whenever you start, it's a shift, man. It is hard, and you start, wondering, okay, where do I fit? What do I do? It sucks, and that's I'm in the financial life of helping people navigate through that, from professional sports athletes to just the general guy, but. That's the bigger conversation I have with my athletes. It's like, okay, be starting to think, because unfortunately it's coming. Yeah. You never know when they're going to yank that off. But it's or
one injury might ruin it.
One injury, one pitch. Been there, done that too. And and as we talked about, the game is changing. You just never know what's going to be that catalyst that's going to, you're going to be done. So. Sure. I don't know if that answered your question, man, but there was a lot in that one.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And I guess something I like to talk about as well that I think you kind of hit on was baseball can't be your identity and who you are, because at some point it's going to come to an end, and you're going to have to then deal with figuring out who you are. And so, yeah, I think it's a positive thing to encourage kids to, yeah, absolutely give it all you got. Give it your best shot, work hard, maximize the abilities that God's given you, but at the same time, realize that who you are as a person, where you get your value as a human being, doesn't come from your performance on the field. And if you do find your identity in your performance on the field, then it's going to be quite the roller coaster of a life. So that's cool hearing you say that.
Well, you said the one magic word, God. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I think that you said it. We talk to our kids all the time. Is creating in God's image to do great things. I mean, God doesn't create junk. And again, you got to understand who God created you to be, and then how you magnify that in the world. And I think that's the biggest thing we try to stress with kids is, don't deal with, and no offense to social media, but don't get focused on what social media tells you. For sure. Go back to the real principles, and that's, if you stick to that, you can transition through anything from, whatever walk of life to another.
Actually, that kind of makes me want to tell a little bit more of my story. I know I got to tell you a little bit before we hopped on here, but something that I felt. So I had that video that I posted when I got signed, telling my dad, that I had got picked up. And after that happened, I had this whole following on social media, and immediately I felt the pressure of it when I got out to, Palm Beach, Florida with the Nats. It was like, people were recognizing who I was, and there were all these expectations kind of that I felt placed on me from people I didn't even know on social media. Like, all right, like, is this kid going to pan out, whatever else. And yeah, so with the younger generation, especially, it's so encouraging that you get to, share your experience with them, because the truth is this next generation has even more pressures added on top of everything, I think, than even previous generations, because of the social media aspect. It's like, I mean, you got players like, Jackson Holiday and all these young kids who are just in the spotlight. Every move they make is seen and hyperanalyzed by a microscope. And so there's pressure that comes with that, but then also the expectations of, will they pan out to be a good player or not? Because there's a lot of people out there who love to spew their opinion, and if you don't play well, you're perceived as a terrible person. The analogy of being institutionalized is a really good analogy.
It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah, no, it is, man. I felt that pressure on a small scale. I wasn't even some top name prospect or anything like that, but even then, just the few people that did know who I was, it did feel like a lot of pressure on me. So yeah, finding my identity, getting connected in a local church out there was huge. And yeah, it's my encouragement to every kid that I get, a chance to work with is like, man, like be grounded in something other than the sport of baseball, because it's a great game. I love it. It teaches you a lot. But your identity has to be found in something else. So Chris, does your son get to play with Cooper or?
Yep. So his son is actually a catcher, pitcher, utility player. I'd say he plays pretty much anywhere. I think Scott kind of.
You can figure that out. That's good. I can't figure it out yet. Yeah, he's kind of finding his place. I mean, it's hard as an ex-player when you have your kids and they start to feel the pressure of, well, my dad was this, now I got to live up to that. And I'll tell you, as a father, it's hard. The other side of that is, from youth sports, you start to see the coaching out there, and you're like, you want to let your kids kind of forge their own way, but yet you're tired of seeing the garbage that they're taught. and the people that are again having that impact, having that day-to-day interaction, and carrying that role for your kids. So, I've really struggled with it. My oldest one, I royally screwed it up. Thank goodness he went in the Army and they straightened him out. But, I think he was one that inadvertently felt the pressure of, well, my dad, was playing at that time. I've got to live up to these expectations, even though I was not trying to put any pressure. I've always said.
Did he play baseball or?
He did, and then he quit. And then he tried to go back, which was the hardest thing at the high school level after taking 3 years off and having, when I got involved with the high school program, I said, I'm not going to be part of an entitlement program. You want to run it right, I'll do it. And unfortunately, I had to cut my own son. And, for the integrity of the program, that was one of the hardest things to do.
Absolutely.
But it's a teachable moment to him. And I slept on the couch for a couple nights.
Did he
I will
take
tell
it
you
personally,
that.
you think, or no?
He actually took it pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's when you're in the midst of it and you rip the Band-Aid off, I mean, it hurts, but, everyone looks, 10 years down the road, looks back and goes, all right, man, I learned this from that. But, just as a father, that's one thing I will tell you as an ex-player. It's going to be hard to raise your kids up and not make them feel that pressure regardless. I mean, I've told my kids, if you're going to do something, do it at 100%. When you commit to a team, you're in at 100%. You're not backing out. But whether you play or not, I don't care.
You're still there.
I don't care, and did you ever read the Matheny Manifesto, RAC?
No, I haven't.
Okay, read it. Read the letter he wrote. Read the letter, but then also read the book. And he'll say a phrase in there, Mike Matheny says and I say it to my kids all the time, I just love to watch you play. That was awesome. I love to see, doesn't matter the outcome. All right, what'd you learn? We're going to talk strategically through situations and things they did, but no, man, I love to go watch you compete. That's it. That's the best part of being a dad. And that letter I handed out to all my parents for all the teams I coach. I didn't with Ryan's team because it was his, but I hand the Matheny Manifesto out, and it basically says that hey, be a parent, sit on the bench, shut your mouth, and clap. Yep. That's really it. Because all the kids, you can see it when you're coaching them and you're talking to them. The minute they hear that voice, their eyes go to the bleachers, and it's like, oh, all right, I know what's going on, or the coach. We were talking to a team the other day, and their eyes get real big, and I'm like, they've been yelled at their whole freaking playing career, and it's
can't yell their name without them thinking something's wrong.
Something's wrong, and that's what we try to tell guys is like it's a game built on failure. You're gonna screw up. You're gonna screw up more than you're successful. But what do you learn? But you're trying to play an imperfect game perfectly. That doesn't happen.
Never happens.
It's not going to happen. So. Unfortunately, as Mike says, our job is really to undo everything that's been done for these kids so many years and get them to understand that, you're a creature of habit, you're a creature of repetition. Good repetition leads to better success. If you practice right, it will come out on the field. But you work and practice, you have fun in the game.
Yep.
And you try to – Ryan's really good at it of – he's very quiet. He doesn't yell much during the game unless it's something like we talk about. You show your emotion, you show your other team up, or something like that, disrespect to the game, we're going to get on you a little bit. But other than that, it's, hey, you go play the game, we'll talk after,
I'll tell you, you coached your son a lot better than I ever coached mine. and there was, we sat down, we actually sat down at a business meeting. We were just talking about your foundation at one point. Mm-hmm. I was like, your name's Scott Proctor? He's like, yeah. He's like, you're going to coach my son. He's like, oh, you're not going to like me after this season. I was like, no, I am, because I'm that father that wants to see his son be coached by men that are going to teach the game the proper way, and they're not going to go around the bush and play daddy ball, play favorites, or anything to that extent. You earn your time on the field. You get yelled at when you deserve to get yelled at. But the best thing about watching you coach your son is it was never like a time where it was any type of daddy ball. You always taught your son the right way. You didn't yell and scream at him. You brought him to the side, pulled him to the side, and said, hey, you're doing this, do this next. And that was impressive for not only me, but for everybody. And I don't know what happens outside of off the field, but it's never any like, I'm going to scream at you at practice. I'm going to scream at you on the ball field. It doesn't make sense.
Now, the only time I've ever done that was I had a kid one time, and you'll get a kick out of this. I don't complain about umpires. I hate umpiring, so I won't complain about umpires. Right. But we had a game at the high school we were playing, and the umpire was just brutal. And it was almost to the point where it was obvious he had a bias to the team. Mm-hmm. So I walked to the mound, and the kid's looking at me, and I said, I'm going to stare at you right now, and I want you to shake your head and act like I'm ripping you a new one. I said, and when this umpire comes out, I'm not going to look at him, but I'm going to be ripping him a new one, but you can't laugh. And immediately he's like, so the guy comes out, and I'm going off on him. I'm like, how the heck do you have it? You know, and the whole time the kid, and you can tell it, he's trying not to laugh, but I'm staring at him right in the eyes, and before you know it, he just puts his head down and turns away. But
so you're yelling at the umpire.
I'm yelling at the umpire. I'm looking at the kid. The umpire's
so
behind me.
Off your back.
I don't want to show him up in front of the fans, but he had gotten just so bad where it was like something needed to be said. It was negatively. Again, I never feel an umpire wins or loses a game, but it was to that point where I'm like, all right, this is beyond it. But I'm going to try to respectfully do it in a way where I'm not showing him up to the fans. No one knows it, you know, and
professionalism.
Try to be professional, but no, I tell you, coaching your own kid, it's one of the hardest things to do, and I think that's the biggest problem in youth baseball is there's a lot of daddy ball. I think on the other side is I end up being harder on my kid than, and I tell him that right out of the gate. I said, understand, you know, first off, do you want me to coach you? If you don't, that's fine, you know, but if you want me to coach you, understand the scrutiny that's going to come with that. You know, even if you earn something, the scrutiny is going to be that you were given it because, you know, I'm the coach. But, you know, I've always just said I want to be coached the way I wanted to be coached. And I think that was the hardest thing when I played. I mean, Rack, as you know it, you'd hear the commentator make a comment online, and you're like, dude, you remember how freaking hard it was to throw? What are you? You were perfect?
Most of them didn't even play.
Well, but, I mean, even the ones that did, I mean, we'd have them come in the clubhouse, and you'd respectfully have a conversation with them like, man, you know, what the hell? He goes, listen, I've got to say certain things online. Okay, I get it. But I always want to be that coach that remembers how hard that grind was and then still is able to hold the kids accountable. You know, I mean, one, lack of concentration is one thing, but then always build them up, you know, and be able to say, okay, here's the issues we had, but here's the positives. So it's hard. It's hard because in the minute there's emotion and all that, and you get off, and sometimes I'm an idiot too on the field, so.
I think when you're on the field though and you're coaching all these kids, they don't want to. They already know they screwed up. They already know that they made a mistake. They already know that they didn't practice that way. They already know that they put all those hours in the cages or whatever else, and they strike out and they're like, they're already mad at themselves. So why are you going to yell and scream at them on the field? There's no reason. You guys did a fantastic job. When you guys, there was never. Sometimes I'm sitting on the sideline going, "Will you yell at my kid?" And they're just sitting there like talking. You know, they walk away and kind of do it, but it's the proper way to coach is that professional mindset. And I don't think a lot of youth ball players, especially when they're coaching their own kids, I know I was very guilty of it when I was younger, is yelling at my kid as a dad instead of coach. Mm-hmm. You know, if they're acting a fool or doing something dumb on the field, it's like, well, that's different.
Yeah.
But in the heat of the moment, you want to be like, what are you doing? We've talked and we walked through this and we did this the proper way. You know what you're doing, but in the heat of the moment, they make a mistake, and then you make a fool of yourself on top of that, and there's really no reason for that.
Well, the hardest thing, too, is I never realized to get into coaching. I mean, you come out of professional sports, and again, okay, I played X number of years, was privy to play for some, you know, the best managers in the game and be coached by the same guy, be coached by the best guys and play around the best guys. Man, I'm going to be a great freaking coach. After about 2 years, I'm like, what the heck am I doing?
Yep.
This, you know, to be able to navigate all the different things that you're involved with from a coach manager perspective, it's hard. And what I realized was, I mean, I took psychology in college, but I needed to go get a psychology degree because just reading body language or knowing, you know, guys, they laugh at me all the time, like, what'd you go say on the mound? I'm like, I didn't say anything other than, hey, man, take a breath. You're all right. Yep. You've done this. Let's go. Come on, confidence right now. Let's go. I'm not telling them anything mechanically. It's too late then.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of reading body language, understanding the kid, and being able to find a way. And we talk about it a lot of, you know, one-word action terms. You know, in a stressful situation, you can't think of a bunch of different things. But through practice, learning out, okay, if it's a balance or whatever that term is with that kid, being able to go in that point and go, boom, that one word, and it locks them back in. You know, but if you don't have that interaction and you don't have that back and forth with a kid and that trust on their end that you aren't there just to beat them down, you're never going to get buy-in from it.
And that all comes from practices.
It comes from practices, but also too, it's the mentoring. It's, you know, we're really mentors. We're not coaches. You're trying to use baseball situations to be able to mentor a young man into adulthood, because regardless of it, even if they play a long time, it's a fraction of their life. and they're going to have a much longer period of their life where they're doing something in the real world, being a husband, being a father, being whatever, that it's to me going to make the bigger difference. So, that's the thing, is just doing life with the kids and realizing that, you care about them and you're invested in them and you have their best interests in mind. That's it. The Bobby Coxes, the Bruce Bocheys, the Joe Torres, all those guys. You played for great managers. I'm sure guys that you'd run through a wall, and then you had the other ones that you're like, I don't care what that guy says, I ain't doing nothing. And those are the attributes that I picked up from all those guys. Bobby Cox, we're sitting we had just lost to the Giants in the ALDS, and I think it was the ALDS, I can't even remember. It was Bobby Cox's last game, and he's sitting down in the clubhouse with all his family at Turner Field, and he's sitting down having beers with the guys. That's the type of stuff that you're like, all right, that's what I want to coach like. Yeah, he cared about his guys.
Did you have that kind of stuff, Rack, when you were coming up through? Obviously we all have good coaches, bad coaches. We have the guys that we look up to, the role models. For me, it was a football coach that kind of turned my entire life around. I never really had a good baseball coach coming up. Upstate New York, you don't really have that. Mm-hmm. But our football coach, truly, I would go home on Friday night, or we had a curfew before games on Thursday and Friday if we had weekend games. And he would literally call my house to make sure that I was there. Yep. Because if I wasn't there, he knew I was doing something stupid. And I knew he cared about us, so I actually gave more to the program than I ever would have if I played with the coach that I didn't care for.
Yep.
God bless his soul. But, yep. He's gone and over now, but he's left, one of the biggest impacts on me and the community. And I think that's kind of where you're going, with your kind of, I don't know how to say, legacy.
No.
You want to leave behind what people want to hear, a good thing, but not only a good thing, but where people actually look up to you and respect you, and they know that what you did was for their own good. It's not just about baseball. I loved what you said earlier about, baseball's such a small portion of your life that it really doesn't mean anything in the big picture.
100%. I can tell you this right now. No one's going to stand. Hopefully no one will stand up at my funeral, but no one's going to recite my life stats in baseball at my funeral.
Right.
So
very true.
What are they going to say about me? Whether when I was playing or when I'm not. But I can guarantee it ain't going to be about my career stats.
Yeah. And I've probably told this story before, but when I first got to pro ball, I was never a very good infielder, but I played infield because I kind of was built like an infielder and, whatever else. But in college, I had I had 4 different managers in college. So I had some that I liked, some that I didn't particularly like. So I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. But when I got to pro ball, this was my first experience with professional coaching, and one of the main differences that I saw, and this is something that Scott, you were bringing up, I feel like there's a much higher tolerance for failure the higher up you go, which is interesting because it was like growing up, I would have coaches who would get all over my case for making an error, for striking out in a big situation, and I get to pro ball and I'm taking ground balls from Bill Miller. And he's hitting everybody ground balls, and we booted probably 4 balls in a row on the infield. We had just got back from spring training, and I was like, third baseman booted the ball, shortstop booted the ball, hit him another one, booted it again. And he calls us all up to the center of the infield, and I'm expecting him to just chew us out. Like, did you guys put any work in this off season? What's going on here? And instead, he calls us up to the middle and was like, hey guys, in 2004 World Series, I'm playing shortstop in game 2, and it had just rained just like it did today. And he was like, the ball was like a wet bar of soap, and I made 3 errors in game 2 of the World Series. And but we won that game, so no one will ever even remember those errors. It wasn't even a big deal. He was like, when you guys mess up, I'm just gonna hit you another one, and you're gonna try to make that play. And if you mess that one up, I'll hit you another one. If you mess that one up, I'll hit you another one. We'll just keep doing it until you get it right, and we'll move on. And when I saw that just left such a big impact on me. I was like, wow, like that's just that's how I wish I was coached, because I had so much just built up anxiety on the infield from previous coaches that I've had. You make one error and then that just will stick in your head for a long time. When you have a coach who's understands that failure is a part of the game and they criticize your effort and not your results, that's when, really special things happen. And so, again, that was part of the motivation for me. Probably similar motivation that you have, Scott, is, when I coach kids, I don't want them to play scared or be worried about making an error. If I'm coaching a kid, I want him to be able to play free and when the time comes and they're not giving 100% of their effort, I'll be like, hey, you've been given this body that, you could be a good steward of this body and give better effort. I know you can, and encourage them, but it's always with their own good in mind. And it's always criticizing their effort and not actually criticizing the results, because again, if you play this game long enough, the results you really can't control. And that was one thing that actually stuck with me one time. I was in college, and a manager who'll go unnamed had just kind of lit me up because I struck out in a big situation. And one of the assistant coaches came up to me and was like, hey man, I just want you to know, like, the further away from the game you get, the easier you remember it being. And he was like, this guy's been out of the game for a little while. I don't think he remembers how difficult it really is. and that stuck with me. And now when, as I'm doing these coaching videos and coaching at the local high school and all that stuff, that stuck with me. And even now I'm sometimes tempted to think like, come on, like, what are you doing up there? And then I remember, now the further away you get from the game, the easier you remember it being. And so yeah, that's I've definitely had my share of great coaches and also bad ones. That kind of makes me passionate about this, coaching the next generation. So along those lines, Scott, if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, who's just finishing up high school or maybe just finishing up college, what are some things that you would tell yourself? What are some ways you would prepare yourself?
I always tell my kids, I play the game so that when it's all said and done, you don't look back and go, what if? Now, no one leads a perfect life. No one has a perfect career. You learn stuff along the way. I can't say that I wish I gave more effort, because, that was just the way I played. It was the way I was ingrained. I definitely made some decisions off the field that I look back and I wish I wouldn't have done. There's interactions I had with certain coaches. I was actually telling a colleague today at work where, open mouth, insert foot, and I probably could have had both feet in my mouth. But I think to really enjoy it, because it's short. I think I got too involved, and I'm a perfectionist, so I got, you have a good successful year, and then you expect that or better. And as I preach to these kids now, you're human. You have air, you breathe air. What do humans do? They screw up. You're going to mess up. It's okay. And again, like you talk about, it's okay to mess up as long as you learn. And I didn't allow myself that. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about making sure the kids understand that it's okay to screw up. Just learn, move on, and adjust, but I think the biggest thing I would just say is enjoy it. I think looking back now, 17 years was a blink of an eye. You had 3 years of college, that's 20 years. I mean, it's less than half my life. Sorry, I'm significantly older than you. But, it's a blink of an eye. And it's crazy to think that I've been out of the game now 10 years, and I still feel I can still smell spring training. I can still feel the grass. I can still all that stuff. That doesn't go away. But, those are the biggest things is just, again, go at it 100%. Don't look back. Learn, adjust, have fun, and just be in the moment. Because I think so many times there's things I look back now that I wish I would have done with the family, or I wish I would have enjoyed more in the midst of it that I didn't, because I was, again, I think it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, because to be able to play in a city like New York, you have to take on a certain persona to be able to survive the environment. It's a very tough environment, between the media, the fans, everything. Like I said, I grew up hating New Yorkers, couldn't stand them, no offense. After playing for them and understanding the organization and understanding the people, I love them. It's one of my favorite cities. I mean, it's not the same city now, but they're going to tell you what you think. You go out there and bust your butt. I mean, I remember one time that after a game, a guy asked me, one of the reporters asked me, what'd you think? I said, man, I freaking sucked today. And I still had fans come up to me like, man, it's all right, dude. Now if I would have made an excuse, they'd have ripped me a new one. Yep. But that's the one thing about the city is they're blue collar guys. They just, you own your junk, you're okay. Now don't do it too much, because they still want to win.
They'll run you out of there.
They will run you out. And that's what I always told, guys, reporters, beat guys would call me up and they're like, hey, so-and-so's here, man. You need to get in their ear. They're avoiding us. And I just go up to them and I was like, listen, don't avoid the media. Stand in your locker. Wear it. They will protect you if you will, work with them. And I said, own your junk. Own your junk to the fans. Own your junk to the media. You do that and you'll be okay. You don't, and you're going to hate life.
It's a good life lesson too, though.
Oh, it is.
It's not just baseball or softball or whatever. If you own what you make a mistake of and you fix it and you move on, like you said, everybody makes mistakes in their life. Own it and move on.
That's what I tell. I mean, even as just a dad. I mean, my daughter, she called me up the other day crying. I'm so sorry. You're not going to love me. I said, babe. I said, what happened? And she told me. I said, all right. You know what? And she, at the end, when we talked, she goes, well, am I grounded? I said, for what? Yeah, you made a mistake. Now, if you'd lied to me,
right,
now we got an issue.
100%.
If you'd have covered it up and I'd had to find it, that's a different issue. Same thing as a player, Go up to your coach. You're going to screw up? Okay, no big deal. Move on.
And I think a lot of coaches at this point in time, they try and push you to be perfect, and it's never going to happen, like you said. And those kids that are taught to be perfect consistently are the ones that fail more so than the ones that are allowed to fail. And it's even growing up and watching, like I moved to Florida and watching my kid kind of become a Floridian compared to Virginia or wherever else I was, is you have to allow these kids to have freedom, because if you don't, to an extent, obviously,
Yep.
but if you don't allow them to make mistakes, how can they learn to make mistakes in the future and own that mistake? And it's the same thing like you're saying in the media in New York. Like, those people in New York are brutal. They are brutal, and they will run you out of New York if you make mistakes, and they will only, though, if you don't fix them.
Yep.
And what you're saying with the RAC, did you ever have that issue when you were going up through college, or have people kind of try and push you to the side to lie about things that you made mistakes with, or teach you a different way in the media? Like, did you guys have media training at all?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I wasn't a big enough deal around that time for anyone to care. So it kind of worked out that way. But when I first got to the Nationals, they had a whole orientation about how to, deal with social media and media in general. And I think that's all good things, because, players are still getting in trouble with that stuff. I mean, even just the other day, you saw that.
I'm glad it wasn't around when I played. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's not like players now are under such a microscope. And I've actually been, my high school coach was a big leaguer, and he'll sometimes tell stories, like Kip Gross. And, he'll sometimes tell stories of like, man, you're lucky that the social media is not a thing, or wasn't a thing then, because, just from these stories he's telling me, I'm like, well, yeah, you'd be in some trouble for that.
There were some things that came out when I played. And they'd always do things in spring training leading up, like, hey, this is what we're finding out, We didn't have social media training from an organization perspective. The organization sent stuff to Major League Baseball where they did it, but I tell you, that was some of the most valuable stuff. And that's, we talk about the kids right now. My son had an instance one day where one of our coaches that we coach with, he's a wildlife biologist, and I probably shouldn't say this on the air, but Cooper, you're going to hate me when you get older. He calls me up and he goes, hey, FWC, Florida Wildlife Commission, has a picture of your son holding a gator illegally. And I'm like, what? And I said, man, I called him. He doesn't answer. I texted him. I'm like, man, if you're screwing with me, go screw yourself. I said, but if it's real, call me. And my son had he had caught an alligator in the neighborhood, and he was holding it with his shirt wrapped around the thing, and he sent it to his friend. We had talked to him about this because he goes out and does it at the ranch, and you're not supposed to do it around home. But he's like, well, Dad, but I trust my friends. And I'm like, but then he sends them to people that he trusts that maybe don't trust you. And I said, all of a sudden, that trickle down effect. You've stolen some guy's girlfriend, or you beat him out on an athletic team, and then he goes out and sends it out. And I said, it's there, man.
Forever.
When we go and search for people for with jobs right now, I talk to all the college coaches. They look for social media. They're whatever the kids are doing. They're scrutinizing every little last thing because they don't want to be put in the limelight. Same thing with us. If a guy's posting his political views on Facebook, we're going to be not as apt to hire him. It's a reality that I don't think these kids realize the gravity of it, because, they can't keep the attention span of a gnat.
And they've grown up with it in their hands forever, so they don't have any different. They don't know any different. We never had. I was that last generation coming through that was like, we were just getting cell phones as I was getting older. So it was becoming more of a RAC. I know this is like, I'm older than you now at this point too. So, but like growing up, we didn't have cell phones until I was probably 14 or 15, and then it was like a special thing to have a cell phone. And watching my son grow up and taking the dumb pictures that we find on their phones, and I try not to look and try not to a certain extent, but you have to protect your kids too, and you have to know what's allowable, and they got to teach them what's allowable. And these kids have no care. They truly think they're invincible all the way through, and then you have a picture on social media that will just spread like rapid fire, and then everybody and their brother changes their opinion on you. It's the same thing with sports in general. Like these kids, it'll ruin your career before you even get there.
I mean, I'll tell you this. We had a kid that during, it was a couple years ago, our first year, had made a comment on Instagram or something. I'm not a social media guy, so I don't know. Department of Homeland Security got a hold of it. And it went all the way down to where he was expelled from school. And ultimately, he's not going to go to college because of it. And it was one word on a social media post. And I mean, we had one in a group chat for a team I coached last year. The kids had a group chat going, and they were trying to motivate a kid. He didn't take it that way, and he made one comment. And I mean, you talk about just a brutal downfall to really a good situation. And that's just the harsh reality of it. And it's scary to see that these kids just don't understand the gravity of it. But that's our job.
Well, and it's your job as a parent and as a coach. And, even RAC, you take it very personally on the influencer side of things. I think there would be a great mindset coach almost to teach these kids at a younger generation coming into high school, because especially in high school is when you kind of start to see the dumb stuff really start to happen. The kids are testing their limits, testing their parents' limits, seeing how far they can get. And they're pulling away, trying to become kind of young adults, and they don't know what's right and wrong. And unless you teach them that at a young age, you're never going to know.
That is true. That is true. It's like I say, I tell my kids all the time, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. I want you to trust me. I want you to be able to come back to me and tell me if you messed up. But, my job's not to be your friend. I'm a parent. There are guidelines, and it's hard. My wife uses the term, and I hate to say it, pick your battles. Even as a coach, I think, when you set your policies and procedures and your rules at the start of the year, the biggest fault I find with most coaches is they don't enhance them. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's one or two things, and the kids are like, this guy, it's the same as every other team. Same as a parent. I keep telling my wife, I'm like, stop telling them unless you're going to do it. And it's going to suck. My son tells me, he goes,
it's the follow through.
When I take his phone, someone will ask him, why'd your dad take your phone? Because I breathed. I'm like, he goes, why do you always take my phone? I said, because that's the only thing you care about. True story. I'm going to take some, true story. You probably heard it.
True story, 100% true story.
But, I'm going to take the thing that impacts you the most because that's what you care about. And, ultimately, it's a pain in my butt when he doesn't have his phone because I can't communicate with him. Yep. And it's easy for me as a parent to just go, default babysitter, here, deal with it. Now I can communicate. I know where you're at. But I'm not going to teach him a lesson. And it sucks. I mean, from a coaching perspective, it's really hard, especially when it's, one of your better players where it's going to impact the outcome of the game. And, but it's just sticking to that principle going, nope.
I've seen you do it on the field, though.
Well,
you guys pulled a couple kids that are some of our better players because they had an attitude in the dugout or they did something dumb. And you have to do that to set that standard, because if that guy can do it, well, why can't this guy? And then why can't this guy?
Well, and that's the biggest thing I think as a youth coach that we're up against when we're trying to instill old school, respectful baseball to a younger generation that's watching, what's going on, the Broadway show and the big league stadiums. What they called us something. I can't even remember the term, but it was basically they called us an old man, an old timer. But it's just the way we were brought up, but that's what the kids are seeing, and it's hard. It's a tough battle, to go against that grain. But I still think it's valuable.
Well, I can tell you, watching the year that I watched this summer, watching the sideline to sideline interaction, and the way that some teams act, especially at 15 and 16 years old, and the things that come out of their mouths compared to what you guys allowed on our sideline, and then the umpires to come up and say, you guys are very classy. You guys are some of the most classy baseball teams that we've ever seen. I'm like, hey, we owe that all to our coaches. And that's that mindset that you guys instill in kids, and that goes a long way, not just on the baseball field.
Oh, it's what they're going to use later in life. I mean, to be a good employee, to be, a good citizen, it's respect. And, I think that's what's getting lost in the game nowadays. The hardest thing, I was a union rep for a number of years, and we had to battle things in collective bargaining agreements, things that I didn't really want to, but out of respect for the older players that were there before me, you have to do that. And I think that's what these kids need to understand is all those privileges they're getting at the big league level now are because of stances and things that older guys had to do. And, respect the game, respect your opponent, respect your coaches, the whole thing. I think it's a big issue.
Yeah, there's a big disconnect, obviously, with the younger generation and old school baseball. What would you say if there were to be a bridge between, say, the kid who's like, well, I want to, express whatever, have fun, and I enjoy playing the game the most when we get to celebrate our wins bigger or whatever else. So to that kid versus, say, the old school guy who's like, well, it's about respecting the game, and if you show up your opponent, you're being disrespectful to the game, and I don't know, how would you say bridge that gap? Because a lot of people fall somewhere on a spectrum. Some people are more hardcore on one end or another. How do you think that gap is best bridged? And do you think that kind of I'll just leave it at that. How do you think that gap is best bridged?
Well, you can answer this question. You can help me out a lot. But I think the term I use to kids a lot of times, and it's more from the younger perspective, because the hard part is the big leaguers have done it and they're continuing to do it. But for the kids, it's like, act like you did it before. I got no problem if you go in a big situation and you punch the side out and you give a fist pump, and you're pumped up, and the energy of the moment causes that thing. Now, you walk off the field, you go get in the dugout, and you cheer your team on. That's one thing. Hit a big home run. I've been Superman by Manny. I get it. Hit a big home run. It's okay. But, the guy from Tampa that freaking stops at third base and freaking puts his hands on it, in this posture, I don't know what you call it, but just act like you did it before.
Don't show people.
Don't show people. That's the thing. I don't know how you do it, but I think there is a in between, a mean. We are just way on the other side right now of it, and I think again the intent. Although the people will tell you it's not to show the opponent up, a little bit of it is, and I tell my kids, so here's the other term I use: look at me. If what you're doing is to get attention focused on you, it's wrong. If you're doing something and the focus is on your team, that's different. So a lot of these guys, I think, what they're trying to do is they're trying to draw attention to themselves. And again, as Ellis says, it's me, me, I. We don't want me, me, I guys. We want team-oriented guys. Act like you did before. Celebrate. Let the emotion of the situation elicit a response, whatever it is, respectful, and then go do your job. Yep. And that's where I tell the kids, again, if it's drawing attention to you or just act like you did it before, then it's over the top. I even think that goes from, how we're wearing neon or pink on teams that don't have team colors that are that color, or shoes. That's drawing attention to yourself, not to the team. And so again, man, we can open Pandora's box here, and you're going to get a lot of hate mail in there because
you're good.
Don't call me an Aubrey Huff, but
what do you say to the coach that's telling these guys that they need to go out and specifically in showcase baseball and in colleges or high school or whatever it may be to bring more attention to yourself?
They're idiots.
They're idiots.
I'll flat out tell them to their face they're idiots and they don't respect the game. That's not what our role as a coach is. I don't believe in walk-up music until you get paid to do it. Getting paid means in college you're getting paid. You're getting a college scholarship. So yes, you get a walk-up song. But when I go to an 8-year-old, coach pitch game and the kid's, doing a backflip going to the batter's box and he's got freaking a song playing, I got a little issue with that. I just don't think it's not what this game's about. This game's about teamwork. It's about team-focused goals. It's about team-oriented stuff, not individualized. Individualized performance leads to a positive team result. Again, if you go out there and do your job, and you do your job consistently, you're going to have a positive team result. But collectively, that's what the goal is, and that's what, to me, the biggest thing I learned from New York was, whether you're Roger Clemens coming back to Kevin Brown, you're not any bigger than the team.
Not
and that was the biggest thing that I learned from that organization was, it's Game 7 of the World Series from day one. That's what Mo always used to teach. PFPs, you're out there, you're covering first. Day one, it's like Game 7. Because, again, when it gets to Game 7, you don't have to change anything.
It's normal.
It's good practice. And that's what I tell our guys. I'm like, you don't have to change anything. If you practice like it's the playoffs now and you take that intent and that focus the whole year long. Now, it's emotionally draining. It's
that
hard.
Pressure comes off later, though.
Yep. And then it's just a matter of going out and having fun. But, yeah, I'm not a big proponent of it. I think that's a big problem, in all youth sports. Unfortunately, youth sports is a business now.
Very much so.
It is. That's all it is.
I hate to say it, but I love it.
I get it.
Business-wise, it's great. On the outside, though, it's tough to watch sometimes, especially when at the high school level you got guys screaming and yelling every pitch. You got guys that are, especially like my biggest pet peeve, watching people pitch in the other sidelines screaming as they're pitching, right? Like you're building it up, and then all of a sudden you hear that one guy and they're like, and like, well, there's no point in that. And as a coach, like, you should change that.
Yeah, I think as a general observation, so I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit as well. But before I do that, though, I think a general observation is that I think as a society in America, everything is very individualistic, right? It's all about me. How can I become wealthy and successful for myself? And there's less of a family dynamic. There's less of a team dynamic in everything. And other cultures aren't necessarily like that. I know a lot of other cultures have a far bigger emphasis on the family unit, and respecting the culture as a whole is a bigger priority. Whereas I think in America, it seems that it's more about the individual self. And I think what that ends up resulting in is people who have way too much pressure on themselves because everything is about them. And I think that's almost like the negative byproduct of all that. And I think that's the pressure that a lot of young players feel as they come up now. It's the spotlight's on them constantly, over and over again. And if their career is truly about them personally, and not about a bigger team goal, then they're going to feel the weight of that being the center of attention, which is a heavy, burden to carry that not everyone's supposed to carry. And so I think, to some degree, I've heard people say, oh, well, you're taking the fun out of the game. You're not letting people celebrate when they succeed. And I do see that in some regard. But at the same time, I think, especially at young ages, you'll see, if a kid is, playing to be the center of attention and put on a show, when they do fail, which is going to happen inevitably because it's baseball, they're going to feel this crushing weight of being a failure and not getting to entertain everybody the way they want to, and they're playing for something else that's way bigger than what they should be playing for. And I think that's where the problem stems from. I think the issue is, I think that people, myself included, we love to be the center of attention and to be in the spotlight. And as a result, you have, people also love seeing other people do that. And so that's why, the bat flips are always on the highlight reels and the big celebrations, the touchdown celebrations, all that stuff, that people love it because I think we love to just self-indulge. And I think that's a bigger problem in our culture that I think can potentially be expressed in sports even further. Along with that, though, I will say, I think there are there's something to be said about the people who get really upset when the other team celebrates against them. I've an argument that I do agree with is like, well, if you really don't want the other guy to celebrate so much, then don't let it happen, right? Like, if you don't want someone to pimp a home run off of you, then don't give up a home run. And if you do give up a home run, then you've given them the right to do whatever the hell they want to do there, right? So
that is a very valid response.
Yeah, and so for me at least, I guess my philosophy, if I were to continue playing, which only Lord knows if that'll happen, but if I were to continue playing, I think I would probably want to be as respectful as I could in the way that I play, and celebrate the wins when they come. But should someone show me up when they beat me, it's kind of like, all right, well, that's you beat me, so you could do whatever you want. You've earned that right.
Yeah, and I mean the only reason I say that there's, again, we could dissect this thing however you want, but again, if it's a big situation and it's a big thing, there's an extent you can't celebrate. Where I have a big issue is back in the old days when analytics weren't so involved. If I'm going into a game and we're up 8-0, and it's 8th or 9th inning, I'm going to pitch those guys different because I'm wanting to get outs quick than I would early. So a guy might get a fastball, in a situation where he typically wouldn't, and then all of a sudden, okay, you're down 8-1, and you're doing freaking pirouettes all around the freaking
Acting
thing,
like an idiot.
you still lost.
You're down.
So
Look at the scoreboard.
I agree, but so I mean that's where again, we can beat this thing until it's dead. But again, I think there's a mean between the way it used to be and the way it is now that's still respectful to the game, that can still take into account. And I totally agree with you. If you don't like it, then get the guy out, or and don't let him give him the opportunity to do it. So
I think as a culture, especially in sports and even in like boxing and whatnot, people will pay to see people fail, right? Like, you are putting on a show. So if you're going out there and you're watching and rooting for somebody to fail, and all of a sudden he succeeds, he's going to try and make you look like he showed you up. So like you said, do your job.
Yep.
Try and do your job. But it is baseball.
It is baseball.
It is baseball.
No, you brought up some very good points, man. And that's the thing. You got to look at it from a cultural perspective also, because going over and playing Korea, you got to understand that culture there versus Venezuela versus Dominican. I mean, each culture is independent, and they are different. I mean, family dynamics, all that stuff that you talk about, and even being able to relate in that culture. When I went over to play in Korea, I was talking to a Canadian guy, and he goes, I said, I made a comment about, how crazy, how different it was. And he goes, yeah, you freaking Americans, you think you know it all. Some of y'all need to get outside the United States. And it was so true, because we do. It made me really think about those Latin guys that come over and are immersed in all culture and really have to adapt to the way we want it. But when we go into their culture, we want everything done our way.
Right.
And it's not that way. It was never more evident than going over there and really experiencing it firsthand. I was like, wow, everybody should take this opportunity if they get it.
So what is the difference between? I'm interested, because we don't obviously know that. So when you're over there and you're seeing the MLB compared to Korean baseball, what is the biggest difference?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I will tell you was they had 3-a-day spring trainings. Left, signed a 1-year deal over there with Doosan. Came when we started in spring training in Arizona, and I would get to the ballpark at 7, and the guys are coming off the field. All of a sudden, we'd have a full day of practice. We'd go eat dinner. And I'd look out in the parking lot, and they're under the lights swinging until their hands are bleeding, taking dry swings. The work that they put in was incredible.
You think the same thing over in Japan type of deal?
Oh, yeah. I mean, their way out of what they know is that. And if they don't, I mean, it's I always laugh with these guys, these young kids. I keep telling them, like, baseball's a hobby to you. Baseball's a social experience to you. To the guy in Venezuela, it's either that or going picking avocados in the field.
Absolutely.
Like you're up against, and that's the same thing with, Korean and Japanese baseball. I mean, the only way to not serve in the military in Korea is to win a gold medal. You don't win a gold medal, you're not on a, the goal is to get there so you don't have to go serve, and not that they don't like it, but that's one of the motivations. It's a different motivation than American kids.
It's a work ethic that people don't
It's a
know.
work ethic, but it's a different game. They go about it different. The hardest part to getting them to understand from the American side is, I mean, just say you're on the mound, and a guy takes off running to third base. They'd run so out of control, they couldn't even throw the baseball. So get them to slow down and go, man, they can't outrun you throwing this baseball. Get them to commit, boom, give it up. It's just getting them to slow it down, because, again, it's life or death to them.
Right.
And, the biggest other thing I think was it's a different game, meaning it's more fundamentally sound. They don't, you got maybe 1 or 2 guys in the lineup that can thump it. The rest of them are contact. They bunt a lot. They steal a lot. You better be able to hold the runner. You better be able to field your position. It's exactly. It's like a playoff game in America. They go back to that, but it's harder to strike guys out because they go to contact. Their approach is different. So
when you talk about approach, when you're taking your coaching side of things now, do you take some from what you learned in Korea, and some of what you learned in MLB, or do you just kind of make it your own?
The hard part is too, and I talked to Ellis about this. You have this great impression. You want to go back and you want to teach major league style to high school kids or little league kids. It's hard because these kids aren't ready for it. So what I've ended up morphing into is a simplified version of what you want, to be able to dumb it down. I shouldn't use simplified enough where they can actually execute on it.
Sure.
So it might not be the way it's done in pro ball, but it's what you're trying to do is ultimately get the end result of them understanding the process and what they're trying to do, and do it. So, no, I take things from everything. From what I learned to Korea, pro ball, college ball, and just really try to relate it to that kid in that situation to be able to ultimately help him, get better.
I can tell you when we first watched, I came out and watched the first practice that we had in the summertime, and it was like watching a really bad Little League baseball. And I came into the shop and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen so many drop fly balls. I've never seen so many booted, especially on a travel showcase team. And literally Ryan walked up, he said, we're not going to touch a bat for a month.
Like, and how many times did we touch a bat all summer?
Not one time. And
I was baffled.
Yep. But honestly, like our defensive play kept us in every game, you know, and if we hit, we won. If we didn't hit, we lose.
Yep.
But my son learned more in this one season than he has in the last 3 seasons. And it's just from listening, understanding from people. You guys were able to simplify the game to a point where it was taught the proper way, but it wasn't over-taught. And a lot of guys that come out of MLB and they're out coaching youth kids, they don't know how to teach teenagers. And I think, you were kind of a little bit of a buffer for Ryan because Ryan was expecting here. and you're kind of like, hey, listen, we have to kind of slow down. And then, Ryan and Louie, they did a great job doing with what they did. But trying to have a coach that comes out of the pros teaching youth kids that has never done it before, they're going to struggle.
It is. And it just because you could do it doesn't mean you're a great coach. Yep. And just because, and I will say too, even though you couldn't do it doesn't mean you can't be a great coach.
Right.
The one thing that I think that I've been blessed, tremendously blessed, in getting out of the game is who I surround myself with. So one of the things we talk to the kids a lot about is penny friends versus quarter friends. And the big thing, it's if you got 100 pennies, you got 100 friends. Kind of like social media. You want likes, you want all these people that. But you know what? Ultimately, if you get in a freaking jam, do any of them care? No, they don't. But if you get 4 people real close to you that truly do care, and that's ultimately the path you're going to lead in life. But with me, too many guys, I think, get out of pro ball and, again, are so focused in them and their image and all that, as opposed to, okay, how can I get better? And surrounding themselves with guys that are better and being humble enough to go, man, that is a better way to do that. Or, hey, how did you get there? And we have 2 guys at the high school that I coach with, me and this other guy, Rob Murphy, played 16 years in the big leagues, and he's a lefty, I'm a righty. Both fundamentally preach the same things, but we say it in 2 different ways. Yeah. And there will be times I'll be talking to a kid, and I'm looking at him, I'm watching his body language, I'm like, man, this kid is not getting it. So I'll look at Murph, and I'll be like, hey, we got to switch. We'll switch, he'll talk, and I'll listen to what he's telling him. So the day he's not there, I'll go up to him and be like, hey, Billy, what did Coach Murph say? He used this term, right? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, do you know what that means? Boom, and he does it. So, anything in business and in life, if you're not humble enough to know that I can be better and be content enough in who you are to surround yourself with people that are better than you and motivate you to get better and learn, you're just going to go, be the same. But it's hard because you got to be secure in who you are and not feel that you're inferior just because they have more experience.
I think that comes with age too.
Well, it does.
A little bit of wisdom, a little bit of knowledge, and understanding that people can teach you to be a better person also, and be open to it. I was always taught surround yourself with 5 people that want the same thing as you do. And if you put yourself in a bad situation by having a good friend, whether you grew up with them or not, they're going to screw it all up for you sometimes, and sometimes you have to pull away. And it's the same thing in sports. Surround yourself with people that want the same goals as you.
Well, I tell you, you asked a good question. That just, what would I do different? I'd pick out different guys to hang with when I played. I hung out more with the party crew, and ultimately, that's what I did. I probably would have gotten in a different circle. So that, going back to a question you asked earlier, that's what I would do different.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's great advice, and I've seen that in my own life as well. I think anyone can attest to this as well. Just you are kind of the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so, yeah, definitely would encourage anyone listening with that. As we wrap this up, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of what's next for you, Scott, and what's kind of your vision with your foundation, with what kind of impact you want to make. Walk me through what you want the next 10 years to be like.
The biggest thing I want is I just want it to make an impact, a positive impact in kids in the community. Ultimately, if one kid makes better life choices because of the things, the interaction they've had with us, we do a lot of different things in the community. So And we're a totally volunteer-run organization, which is tough because you're dealing with volunteers. But we've got some tremendous people that do some things that never get credit. But again, I think ultimately, I'm not leading my life for any reason. And I hate to say it. That one day when you're standing in front of him, was I a good steward with the time I had? And that's kind of what I tell my kids now is, I'm going to speak from a place because if I don't want you to do what I did. I did a lot of, I told them, I'm like, I was a major screw up. I mean, thankfully, I'm not in jail. I hopefully can impart some knowledge of what paths not to go down. But I ultimately hope that people will say at the end, hey, man, I enjoyed being around him. He made a major impact in my life. And from a foundation perspective, I hope my kids take it over. My daughter, who it's named after, is, I keep trying to tell the kids, it's like, all right, you want something, grow up and work on it. Take ownership of it. Don't be the idea presenter. Be the one that presents the idea and then acts on that idea. So, I tell you right now, I'm just trying to spend time with my kids, with my family. We're going to spend some time this next year. My son's actually getting stationed in Germany, so we're going to take some family vacations over there.
That'd be awesome.
And then just watching your kids grow. Because I told my wife, I said, we're not too many years from, I'm going to look at her and go, what's your name again? But no, that's it, man. Just trying to make an impact, surround myself with good people, and really just impart whatever I can into kids.
Can you just let everybody know what your foundation is called, what it's, where they can find information on it and where they can help out?
My daughter's name is Mary Elizabeth, who it's named after. So when we did it, the hospital, Jackson Memorial down south, did it. They call it Emmy's Team. We call her Emmy for her initials. So it's emmysteamfoundation.org. We do have a social media post where, again, very, very small. We do one sporting clay event a year, but we're involved a lot with the inner city here, just using life ball to teach life skills to kids. We partner with Martin County North Little League here to put kids from a certain area of town on one team and basically provide everything for them. They just have to show up and they can play. But it's much more than that. Between FCA, we partner with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and just really anybody in the community that is not about themselves and wants to put kids first. And I think that's really what we've done more than anything is not try to do everything for everybody, but be very good at what we're at and then partner. We have a lot of tremendous groups, foundations in this community that all serve different purposes. And there's others that maybe have a drug mentoring program that if we have a kid that gets in trouble, rather than kick him to the streets, hey, go through that, and then you can come back. But again, always being that person that the kid can come back to, that you're not just, using them for their talent. It's, hey.
Trying to guide them through life.
Yeah, we had a girl this year. I love her, Amaria, but she didn't want to play baseball. Found out she liked art. So one of our donors' wife has a foundation that runs an art program, and I'm like, Amaria, do you want to go, and she loves it, and she still comes to the baseball field. Awesome. She'll still come out, but baseball wasn't her thing, Yep. And that's why I think, again, we all have our gifts. We all have things that God has put in our life to be able to give back. And we just got to put the kids first and work together and not have it be about us.
Well, Scott, this conversation I know didn't go anywhere where I thought it was going to go. But I think the audience is going to love this conversation because you guys, between you and RAC, you guys have a lot of great experiences in the MLB and trying to walk through and actually guide them a different direction. Mm-hmm. RAC, yours was a little bit shorter as of right now, but the way that you're kind of heading into teaching kids and growing up and allowing those kids to kind of be taught the proper way. And Scott, doing what you're doing in the community, I'm a huge fan. I always will be. I have nothing but respect for you. And I'm hoping other people will reach out and maybe help your foundation after listening to this.
Well, thank you. The only thing I'll tell you, RAC, is no matter, people ask me what was the one thing in my career that was the coolest experience I had. And it was my dad. I got to play catch in the old Yankee Stadium with my dad. And he came, we went through Monument Park, and I told him, I'm like, Dad, you can't touch anything in the clubhouse. And he immediately goes over to somebody's locker and grabs their bat. And I'm like, don't do it. But what I've done since playing has been far more rewarding than anything I did when I played. Now, if I hadn't played, I probably wouldn't have the platform to be able to make the impact that I do and have people that listen. But I will tell you, you're making a much bigger impact now than you ever could do on the field. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm always an open book. But like I said, it definitely went different than I think we were intended.
Well, we'll have to have you back on. We'll actually talk baseball, like your previous history.
Sounds good.
Talk a little Joe Torre or something along those lines.
Sounds good.
In the meantime, we will definitely put the link in the show description for the foundation. And
Appreciate
if you
it.
guys have any questions, they can always email us, and we'll send them your way.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate the opportunity.